Greetings and a warm welcome from the UK. And tonight's broadcast, we're going to do something slightly different, and maybe we'll follow on in this manner for 2 or 3 weeks. And I'd like to entitle this next 2 or 3 sessions as Deep Roots Teaching. By this I mean what we're going to do over the next 2 or 3 sessions is we're going to look at how the Jewish people regard some of the scriptures, and rather than using any comment or research on this matter from elsewhere, this is just something that I've put together using only Jewish sources, basically. So we're going to speak about the book of Ruth and the importance of it, not just for Christians per se, but particularly for the Aliyah, and with a real appeal for us to get really involved, body, soul, spirit and mind, so to speak. Ruth, well-known story, wonderful story. It's even been called the most beautiful short story that's ever been written. And it really is rather lovely, isn't it? And it's been the subject of poems, paintings, and plays, all kinds of wonderful expressions of the beauty of the writing, written in Hebrew on a single scroll. And it's known in Hebraic or in Jewish thought as a Megillah, Rut, the scroll of Ruth, which is one of the 5 Megillot, single Megillah, something that's written on a single scroll. And it's included in the 3rd division of, or sometimes known as the writings, Ketuvim in Hebraic, of the Hebrew Bible. Traditionally, it's read during the Jewish pilgrim festival of Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks, Pentecost, and of course, in common with Pesach, it is a harvest festival. And the book of Ruth, of course, is set against the harvest. According to the Talmud, in Baba Batra 14b to 15b, it tells us the prophet Samuel wrote the book of Ruth. Rather interesting, isn't it? Some suggest that it was Nathan the prophet, and yet others propose, because of its relationship to the lineage of David, it arose during the court of Solomon. Well, we'll never really know who composed it, because the text itself doesn't identify the author. Though whoever wrote it, it really is a wonderful piece of literature composed by a skilled storyteller. Another suggestion is the book was written by a female author, possibly Tamar, the daughter of David and the great-granddaughter of Ruth, who herself, as we know from the story, experienced tragedies within her own life. The text is very sympathetic towards women in the day and age it was written, but it doesn't mean that it couldn't have been authored by a man. Enough to say, it's better to look at the content of the book, and we'll probably leave its background with being sufficient to say it probably occurred or appeared in its current form during the Persian period, which is 550 to 330 BCE. So, let us delve into the timeless wisdom of the book of Ruth. The narrative that extends far beyond a simple story of loyalty and love. It's a tale of taking risks. It's a story of stepping into the unknown. It's a story of trusting in God and His guidance. It's a story about the hope of destiny. Ruth's story is not only one of inspiration, but it's also a story that offers profound lessons that we can learn in our own lives. And as we look through this beautiful writing, we'll uncover how Ruth's courageous decisions can inspire us ourselves to embrace the journey on the highway of holiness. Concerning Aliyah, inspire us just how holy Aliyah to the Lord is. So as I say, I'm only going to use rabbinical, midrashic and Talmudic references as we go through this beautiful story. So who was Ruth? It tells us that she was a Moabite woman. The Moabites were held in very low esteem and generally considered to be antipathetic to Israel's story. As a Moabite woman, she made a courageous and quite outstanding decision that not only altered her life, but it also altered the course of Jewish history. So we know that Naomi, her name means comfort, or being comfortable, had two sons, Mahlon and Chilon. And Ruth married into this family. And after the death of her husband, she made a remarkable decision in this case, to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi, and return to Bethlehem. This decision was fraught with uncertainty, nervousness, danger. What good could come of this? This great love that she had for Naomi overcame everything else. And I like to believe that this confidence arose because she saw the presence of the Lord in her poor, distressed, bereaved mother-in-law. It's hard to think, isn't it, to make this attachment when Naomi says to Ruth, no longer call me Naomi. Don't call me comfort. Call me Mara. Call me bitter. Mara. Bitter. Something really remarkable is taking place in what this lady is doing. She's leaving her history behind her. She's leaving a culture behind her. Leaving her homeland behind her. And everything went with it. Leaving behind the remnants of her family. Doesn't tell us what kind of a family that Ruth had, but one can imagine, as of the time, it's probably fairly large. And she was leaving behind any tangible future that she could know or imagine. To me, some of the most precious words in the scripture are these. Ruth's words that she says to Naomi, when Naomi saying, I'm going back to Bethlehem, expecting fully to go back by herself. And then Ruth says to her, where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, or where you stay, where you domicile, if you like, I will lodge. I will do likewise. But this is the wonderful thing. The wonderful thing. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Let's just think about that. Let's just take it into our heart and our spirit, shall we? Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And surely, those of us involved in the Aliyah, those of us who are Bible-believing Christians, should be able to say those words, shouldn't we? That the Jewish people will be our people, and their God will be our God. I remember very early on when the Lord gave me this heart for Israel, the Jewish people, and the call to work, I stood with my wife and we said those words, Lord, your people, oh Lord, will be our people. And their God, you yourself, will be our God. As time went by, I shared some of these things, and together in gatherings, we would gather together and make what I call the Ruth Declaration. Maybe you might like to do this yourself at some time. The Ruth Declaration. Your people will be my people, and you, God, will be my God. The God of Jacob will be my God. The God of Israel will and is my God. We will never succeed in anything we do with the Jewish people unless we accept them as being part of us, or more correctly, us being part of them. That's very important, as Paul reminds us in Romans 9. Amazing. Ruth 1:6, that is. In the Talmud, Yevamot 47b, describes Ruth's conversion as the ideal model for someone who finds the God of Israel. The ideal model, underscoring her personal, total embrace, not only of the faith, but of the people. And the two things, my beloved, go together. If we reject the Jewish people, we've also rejected God, haven't we? If only those that follow replacement theology, or displacement theology as I like to call it, if only they would learn the lesson of Ruth and make the Ruth Declaration, wouldn't the life of the church be more enriched, more authentic? Would it be able to move forward in a much better way? Yevamot tells us that Ruth's choice was not just a personal risk. It wasn't only the physical danger, not the emotional danger, not the fear of rejection or anything like these. It was a leap of faith into the arms of the Lord. Maybe we've all done that one time, but maybe isn't it a good time again to take a leap of faith into the arms of the Lord as we live through the times that we're living in? Times that we've never witnessed in our lifetimes of the persecution of the Jewish people, the libeling of the Jewish people, and the defamation of the Jewish people. We'll be back with you shortly. In the meantime, let's thank God for the story of Ruth.
What would you do if someone was breaking into your house? What would you do if someone was trying to hurt your spouse or your child? What would you do if you knew someone was hacking into your computer, your personal information, or your bank accounts? In each of these situations, if you were a responsible person, you would secure your house, protect your family, and lock down your accounts. I mean, it just makes sense, right? What would you do if the neighbors on each side of you were all trying to hurt you or your family? How about your country? This is the situation in Israel. They just want peace, but their neighbors want to destroy them. Don't they have the right to defend themselves, their families, and their country? We think so. I mean, what would you do? If you'd like to help protect your brothers, sisters, and friends in Israel, then please give to the Emergency Relief Fund. Just go to EzraInternational.org and click on Projects, Emergency Relief Fund, and give what you can today. So, what would you do? What can you do? Because you can help today.
Welcome back. The context of the story we've been sharing is essential. Naomi, when you think about this, very often we read stories, we don't kind of think about the whole picture. There's an old Chinese saying, if you put a black dot on a sheet of white paper, what do you say? You see the black dot, don't you? Which might be a 10,000th of the whole thing. The main thing is a piece of white paper. So bearing that in mind, this sense of love and loyalty and love transcending everything that she knew, sent her forward. She didn't know what was going to happen to her, and neither did Naomi, but they went together. Can two walk together unless they're agreed? Ruth's story is the most wonderful example of Chesed. Chesed is normally translated loving kindness, and those of you know of the work that we've done alongside Ezra with Ezra, and before the work in the Ukraine for those that could not make Aliyah, was named Chesed. Loving kindness, yes, but the biblical use of the word Chesed is more than loving kindness. It is, in fact, practicing the presence of God, being God to somebody else. And the way that Ruth was to Naomi is an example for all of us to this day of Chesed, loving kindness, of practicing the presence of God. Surely, the call to all one of us is to practice the presence of God, not only with all that we meet, but surely to the Jew first. Then we come to the field, don't we? Naomi brings Ruth's attention to Boaz, a man of noble character. And we know the story, don't we? Boaz recognises Ruth's courage. He recognises her devotion. And it's a wonderful thing. It's a great prayer for all of us to pray, that we might both practice and receive Chesed. That we might receive God's Chesed, and we might practice it through our lives. So here we have a story of Ruth's Chesed towards Naomi being manifested. And Boaz's Chesed to Ruth being manifest. And together, God's Chesed takes identity for the nations that are to come, for the kingdom that's to come, and for the time and reign of King David and everything that follows on from there. The mutual exchange of Chesed is a beacon of light in a time of darkness, and it was also at that time. Chesed transforms lives. Chesed opens the way for divine intervention. The book of Ruth, I would like to think, could also be subtitled The Book of Chesed. Boaz's actions towards Ruth are a model of the Jewish ethic, of the biblical ethic, is a better way of putting it. Boaz went beyond requirements of the law. Because, as you know, Levitical law would require a kinsman redeemer, someone from the family to marry the widow of somebody in the family, put it very simple. And quite frankly, as you can imagine, it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. The requirement was to support the widow, whether actually married them or not. In some instances, is discussing these is open to some measure of discussion, but Levitical marriage was a preference. But if not, there would be a hope for a kinsman redeemer who would provide food, protection, and possibly clothing, and a dignified place to glean in the fields. His action reminds us of the Talmudic teaching in Pirkei Avos, that's the ethics of the fathers, in the very beginning. The world stands on three things: Torah, the service of God, and Chesed. Now there's a thought, isn't it? In the teaching of the fathers. The world stands on three things: the Torah, which is obvious for Jewish people. And let's remember that Yeshua came to fulfill Torah, didn't he? Not change it. He came to fulfill it. That stands. The service of God for Christians today, that stands. And Chesed, that stands. Can I ask you how many acts of Chesed have you practiced today? How many acts of Chesed have you practiced this week, this month, this year, last 10 years? We've all followed Torah as we understand it's fulfilled in Yeshua. I don't question that. I don't question the service of God, which can be in any ways. Intercession is a great service of God. Intercession is the fuel of the ministry in every ministry. The Chesed, action, is the thing that God requires from us. Can I appeal to you? Right, look at your heart. Ask God, may I receive and give. May I receive and practice Chesed as a part of my life. The presence of God and the heart of Messiah. God's Chesed. The whole thing about Aliyah needs to be understood in terms of Chesed. But it also needs to be understood in the three things in the ethics of the Father. The Scripture, the service of God, may it be intercession, sharing, comfort. The Chesed is more than loving kindness. It is practice of the presence of God and the heart of Yeshua. Let's see how individual acts of kindness can lead to a broader expression of the kingdom and divine blessings to those that we encounter and to the Jewish people as we labour to bring that Chesed to the Jewish people, returning them home to their covenanted historical homeland in the fulfillment of all those wonderful prophecies that we've loved and read and shared. I'm appealing to you today. Don't forget the loving kindness of God that operates through you in small acts of kindness, medium acts of kindness, massive acts of kindness. But if we both receive and practice Chesed, we are bringing the presence of God into the very area that we even live and breathe and walk in. Remember that Paul said, in him we live and move and have our being. If we live and move and have our being in Yeshua, if we live and move our being in the God of Israel through Yeshua, surely it must be a prime thing to move away from romantic imagination, away from a weeping heart, away from a heartfelt sympathy and empathy for the Jewish people, but to practice acts of Chesed towards them. So let's just move on a little bit from there. In Judaism, Ruth is held as a quintessential experience of a tzaddik. If you're not familiar with the word tzaddik, it means righteousness. A tzaddik or a tzedek is a righteous person. And the aim of a person, as a practicing Jewish person, is to achieve being a tzaddik, a righteous person. But what about Gentile? How do you become a righteous person? Well, obviously we can hope to be a righteous Gentile, can't we? But the way we do this is to use Ruth as a model again. We're not going to convert to Judaism because we are included. We haven't superseded. We haven't demolished, destroyed, or taken over or displaced. We've been grafted in, and we are nourished by the roots. So our faith needs to be that, as Ruth, heartfelt, without condition. The Midrash tells us that Ruth's conversion was sincere and complete. Her conversion and her life became an exemplar of faith and ethics. And of course, by that it includes acts. The process of conversion in Judaism is not just a formal ritual, but a deep personal commitment to live according to Torah. As a Christian, our conversion should be exactly the same thing, a personal commitment according to the scriptures. Ruth's story highlights the spiritual depth and sincerity required for a transformation such as hers. If you want to convert to Judaism today, if you wanted to, you would have to undergo a process called Gir. And that takes at least 2 years of intense study, language study, cultural study, many, many things. Then after that, there's generally maybe a year's probation after that. But deep study and deep commitment are requirements. In Christianity, put your hand up, and 5 minutes later, you're a full-blown Christian. In a lot of churches, most Christians don't undergo any teaching, or worse than that, any discipleship. I've seen and even taught many discipleship courses. But the thing I've always wanted to teach, right from the beginning, and this is very important when it comes to Jewish people, it's not what you say, it's what you do. It's not what you say, it's who you are. So, I just want to say, to conclude, the extraordinary story of Ruth stays with us, and my final words today are simply these. Let us live by those 3 things. The scriptures, the service of God, and Chesed. Pray with me. I've said it many times. I just close. O Lord our God, may we receive and may we live and bring Chesed in our personal lives, particularly to the Jewish people and to Aliyah. And as ever, God be with you until we meet again.